Idris Elba's father spent his life building Fords. His son now owns the ones he could never buy. Winston Elba spent 25 years on the assembly line at Ford's Dagenham plant in East London, building cars he could never afford to own. His son worked the same night shift decades later, on the same factory floor, partly to save money and partly because his father wanted him to. Today, that son drives a Mustang. He has driven a Ford rally car through an actual FIA championship round. He has launched a genuine NHRA spec dragster down a quarter mile. And Ford himself eventually paid him to be the face of its newest Mustang. This is a story of every Ford in Idris Elba's life, and the father who never lived to see where the family name ended up. The factory floor that started everything. Before any of the Fords that came later, there was the Dagenham plant itself, a sprawling industrial complex on the banks of the Thames that has been building Ford vehicles since 1931. Idris Elba was born in 1972 in Hackney, London, to Winston Elba, a Sierra Leonean immigrant, and Eve Elba, originally from Ghana. Winston worked at the Ford Dagenham plant for 25 years. Idris has described what that job meant inside their household in plain terms. "My dad loved his job. He brought it home with him. It was our community. We drove Fords, and it wasn't just a job to him or me. It was part of our lives." When Elba was in his late teens and early 20s, struggling to make money while chasing acting work, he took a part-time job on the assembly line at the same Dagenham plant where his father had worked for years. He did the night shift for roughly 2 years. He has said plainly that he hated it. He has also said plainly why he did it anyway. "My dad worked there for 25 years, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps." The job was not glamorous. It was not a stepping stone in any career sense. It was a son standing on the same factory floor as his father, building the same cars, because that connection mattered more than the discomfort of a night shift. That factory floor is the real starting point of this story. Everything that follows, every Ford that Idris Elba has driven, raced, or endorsed since, traces back to that building in East London, where a Sierra Leonean immigrant spent a quarter century assembling vehicles for a company that would, decades later, hand his son the keys to drive its future. Dagenham itself carries its own weight in British industrial history. The plant opened in 1931 on marshland beside the Thames estuary and became one of the largest car manufacturing facilities in Europe, employing tens of thousands of workers across multiple generations of the same East London families. For immigrant families like the Elbas, a job on that assembly line represented genuine economic stability in a country that did not always make stability easy to find. Winston Elba's 25 years there were not simply employment. They were the foundation that allowed his only child to eventually take the risk of pursuing acting at all. Ford number 5, the Toyota Avalon that almost wasn't a Ford story at all. Before any Ford entered Elba's personal driveway as an adult, his actual first car was not a Ford at all. It was a Toyota Avalon, a full-size sedan with a 3.5-liter V6 that he has described fondly as spacious, comfortable, and entirely unglamorous. It is worth including in this story for exactly one reason. It shows that Elba's early relationship with cars was never about status or speed. It was about getting from one place to another reliably, while he chased a career with no guarantees attached to it. The Avalon represents the years before Ford re-entered his life on his own terms, rather than his father's. That changed the moment Ford came calling, not as an employer this time, but as a partner. Ford number 4, the Ford Fiesta R1 rally car. The Ford Fiesta R1 is a car that proved Elba's relationship with speed was not a marketing invention. For his 2015 Discovery Channel series, Idris Elba, No Limits, he fulfilled what he has called a childhood dream by competing in the actual Circuit of Ireland rally alongside professional rally driver Jimmy McRae, driving a genuine Ford Fiesta R1 rally car. This was not a controlled stunt on a closed studio set. The Fiesta R1 took part in the 2015 ERC FIA European Rally Championship, a real, sanctioned, professional rally series. Elba described the experience without exaggeration. "I'm taking on the toughest racing challenges of my life. A Ford Fiesta built for rally competition is an unforgiving machine, designed for drivers with years of specific training in reading terrain at speed, managing a co-driver's calls in real time, and controlling a car that wants to slide on every surface. Elba did it anyway, in a genuine FIA-sanctioned event, in a Ford built specifically for that purpose. The choice of car matters here as much as the choice of event. Ford has built Fiesta rally cars for decades, specifically because the platform is light, agile, and forgiving enough for a driver transitioning from road cars into proper competition, while still being capable enough to genuinely compete at international level in the right hands. Elba was not handed a watered-down promotional vehicle. He was handed the genuine article and pointed toward an actual FIA championship round. Ford number 3, the NHRA-Style top-fuel Dragster. For his earlier 2013 documentary, Idris Elba, King of Speed, which explored the global underground racing scene, Elba did something that very few actors, let alone people outside professional drag racing, have ever attempted. He got behind the wheel of a genuine top-fuel dragster, the fastest class of drag racing vehicle in the world, capable of accelerating from a standstill past 300 miles per hour over a quarter mile in under 4 seconds, using a fuel mixture that burns hotter and faster than ordinary racing gasoline. This was not a Ford in the conventional sense of a badge on a showroom floor. It was Ford-adjacent drag racing culture at its most extreme. The kind of machine that the same company whose factory floor employed his father for 25 years has sponsored and supported in drag racing competition for decades through programs like Ford Performance and its long history of factory-backed funny car and top fuel programs. For a man whose entire relationship with the Ford name began on an assembly line, climbing into one of the fastest accelerating vehicles ever built and launching it down a drag strip is as direct a statement of inherited obsession as exists in his entire career. Ford number 2, the land speed record cars and the Bentley that almost wasn't a Ford story. In 2015, as part of the same Idris Elba No Limit series, Elba broke the British land speed record for the historic Flying Mile course at Pendine Sands in Wales, a record that had stood since 1927 when it was set by Sir Malcolm Campbell. Elba achieved an average of 180.3 miles per hour with a top speed of 186 miles per hour, breaking a record that had survived for 88 years. The car he used to do it was a Bentley Continental GT Speed, not a Ford. It deserves a place in the story anyway, because the same Discovery series that put Elba behind the wheel of that Bentley is a series that also put him in the Fiesta R1 and connected his entire public identity to high-performance driving culture. It was that reputation, built across documentaries showcasing genuine motorsport competence rather than celebrity tourism, that made Ford's marketing department look at Idris Elba in 2019 and see exactly the right person to introduce their most important new product in a half-century. Ford number 1, the Mustang Mach-E and the full circle moment. In November 2019, Ford named Idris Elba a creative partner for the launch of the Mustang Mach-E, the first all-electric vehicle to carry the Mustang name in the car's 55-year history. Ford was taking an enormous risk. The Mustang badge had represented a gasoline-powered, V8-driven, distinctly American performance icon since 1964. Putting that name on an electric SUV was, for many longtime enthusiasts, close to heresy. Ford needed a partner whose credibility with car culture was unimpeachable and whose personal story would make the announcement land emotionally rather than as a corporate press release. Elba said it directly. Most people don't know this, but I worked at Ford as a young guy. My dad also worked at Ford. It's practically in my blood. So working on this project and getting behind the wheel of a car that takes us all toward the future feels like things are coming full circle, but with more exhilaration and tech. He drove the production Mach-E ahead of its public launch and gave Ford a review with the kind of specificity that comes from someone who actually understands cars, rather than reciting a script. I just drove the car and it drives really well. It's got some real performance. The Mach-E GT Performance Edition that followed in later model years produces up to 480 horsepower and 700 pound-feet of torque, reaching 60 miles per hour in as little as 3.3 seconds. numbers that would have been unthinkable for any vehicle built at Dagenham during Winston Elba's 25 years on that assembly line. When asked whether he ever imagined working with Ford again in this way, Elba's answer carried the full weight of everything this story has been building toward. "Definitely not," he said. But to say things have come full circle would be a bit of an understatement. "I'm so excited to be partnering with Ford, a brand that has been a part of my life for so many years. And this partnership is very sentimental, as I know my late father, who worked for many years at the Ford factory, would be so proud of me." The father who did not live to see it. Winston Elba was diagnosed with lung cancer in the early 2010s. Idris returned to England from the United States to be close to his ailing father during treatment, putting his own acting career on hold during a period he later described as weird and uncertain. He has spoken about his father's death with visible difficulty in interviews, describing the moment his father drew his last breath while Idris stood directly above him holding his hand. "He looked directly at me," Elba recalled. "Medically, he probably wasn't looking at me, but it felt like he was." Winston Elba worked at the Ford Dagenham plant for 25 years. He built cars on a salary that never came close to affording the vehicles his son now drives, races, and represents in international advertising campaigns. He did not live to see his son named a creative partner for the launch of an entirely new category of Ford vehicle. He did not see the Fiesta R1 take on an FIA-sanctioned rally stage with his son behind the wheel. He did not see the Dragster, the Bentley Record Run, or the Mustang Mach-E reveal. But every single one of those moments exists because a man clocked in for night shifts at an assembly line in Dagenham for 25 years and brought that job home with him every single day, making it part of his family's identity rather than simply a paycheck. Idris Elba did not inherit a fortune from his father. He inherited something the money in his bank account could never have purchased on its own: a relationship with the Ford name that no advertising agency could manufacture and no amount of wealth could fake. That is why Ford wanted him in 2019, not because he was famous, because the story was true. A son who worked the same night shift his father worked for 25 years, who grew up calling Ford's part of the family, eventually stood in front of cameras representing the exact company that employed his father for a quarter century, driving cars his father built but could never own. Winston Elba spent his life building Fords he could never buy. His son now drives the ones that came after, races the ones built for competition, and represents the company itself to the entire world. That is not a coincidence. That is what happens when a job becomes a family's identity, and a son refuses to let the connection end with his father's last breath.